Hello and welcome to another video here from edubconversions.co.uk. My name is Kit and I'm here with Zap, who is a very special guest for us on today's video. Zap is pretty much one of our first customers for eDub many years ago, way back around 2019. One of our first electric campers that we converted for somebody else. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity to have a chat with Zap and to just hear a little bit more about his story so that you guys can hear what that sounds like and so you can learn a bit more about the process of what it's like to be thinking about an electric camper, the experience of what the conversion process looks like, and then ultimately what living with a camper looks like as well. So first of all, welcome.
Hi.
So we'll start at the beginning. First of all, just quickly introduce yourself, and then if you want to tell us a bit about the reason that you started exploring the idea of an electric classic camper van.
Okay, my name is Zap, and my wife is Rachel, and we live in Leeds. Rachel has wanted a VW camper since she was a teenager, since she was learning to drive. In 2011, she was diagnosed with MS and gradually lost her abilities, gradually became more disabled, to the point that she could no longer drive by about 2014, 2015. She still wanted a camper, but she wasn't going to be able to drive it. And then, because of her advancing disability, she has some care needs which are means tested. She came into some money, and as lots of people do, they lose their money because of going into care homes and things like that. Because her care needs are means tested, the money she'd come into was going to go on her care unless she spent it. So we decided to go for a classic VW bus to be converted for wheelchair use, because we were going to basically need a wheelchair accessible vehicle at this point anyway. Previously we had a standard car that was getting more and more difficult to get in and out of. So she really needed a wheelchair accessible vehicle around that time. So that's why we decided to go for, to actually spend some money on a classic VW bus that she always wanted. And because we didn't want to run it at 20 miles per gallon for a classic petrol engine.
If you're lucky.
If we're lucky. Well, we rented a camper back in 2013 in Scotland.
Yeah.
Which was petrol motor, of course. And we drove it for 4 or 5 days around the Isle of Skye. And yeah, that did 20 miles per gallon.
Oh, wow.
But it was super unleaded, so it was really expensive to run. Not very green. So we decided to spend some money on a VW camper, VW bus. And initially, the first searches we found sort of end of 2018, beginning of 2019, the only company we could find at the time was right down the south coast. Would have been a very long way to arrange a camper conversion with them. And then by pure luck, we found eDub just up the road from Leeds. And we first came to see Kit in January or February 2019. And Kit agreed to source a van for us, convert it for wheelchair use and for passenger use, and more importantly, convert it for an electric motor. The plan at the time was to use a Nissan motor. I know that, Kit, you've used Tesla motors more recently. And during 2019 into early 2020, about 12 months total it was at the time, the van was sourced very quickly, actually. In fact, it was a van that Rachel found online from a importer.
There's an auction house we found, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So somebody had brought in a huge container loads worth of things from, I seem to remember there was quite a few from South Africa.
Yeah, this was freshly imported from South Africa. It had been a minibus and it had 11 seats, no camper facilities at all because it was a minibus with 4 rows of seats in it. Obviously, several of the seats had to come out to make a wheelchair space. But it was in very good condition. It didn't even have British plates on it yet.
Nope.
But it did still have a running petrol motor, I believe. But it didn't matter whether the petrol motor ran or not. But it was in great condition. So we got it up from Doncaster up to here in North Yorkshire. And then Kit and his team carried out the conversion during 2019 to the very beginning of 2020. And delivered the van complete to us in February 2020. And that is a very significant date, of course, because we had the van for only about 4 weeks before lockdown.
Yep. Yep.
So we got out in it on one great sunny day in March, and it was literally the day before Boris Johnson did his speech in the desk to tell everyone to stay home. It was literally the day before.
Yeah.
So then we didn't get to drive the van very much after that for a while, until sort of late 2020, I suppose.
And so because the other thing that has worked really great for you, you're quite a passionate photographer.
Yes.
And you set up an Instagram handle specifically for Miriam. Did that kind of start around the lockdown time?
Well, yeah,
or?
like lots of other people got heavily into social media in lockdown. I've used Instagram and Facebook for years anyway. But I thought that Miriam ought to have her own Instagram account because there are lots of VW bus accounts out there. Most of them, it's the owner writing as themselves. And I decided that I would write the Instagram account as if it's Miriam herself who's doing the writing. So she talks about her driver, her silly driver, which is me. And she's called Miriam because she's from South Africa, and she's named after Miriam Makeba, famous South African singer from the 1950s, 1960s and onwards. She was a famous singer, but also a famous activist, and she was exiled from South Africa in the mid-1960s and lived in the United States for a while. And she's essentially South Africa's second most famous woman, probably.
Okay.
Because we were considering calling the bus Winnie originally after Winnie Mandela.
Yeah.
But then we went with Miriam after Miriam Makeba instead.
Yeah. So what's the Instagram handle? Remind us.
Electric VWT2.
There you are. Yeah, so Electric VW. And I think you've got more followers than we do. I think at the moment, all around about.
Miriam's got about 1,000 somewhere else.
Okay, but it's good. It's really exciting. So lockdown, not the best time, as you said, to have a new toy to play with that requires leaving the house. But tell us now what it's been like since receiving your electric camper and what the experience has been like and the kind of adventures that you and your family have been on with Miriam.
Well, as I say, Miriam is a wheelchair accessible vehicle and she is our main vehicle. So it's not as if we keep a normal car running and Miriam for special trips or anything. Miriam is a day-to-day vehicle. So at the moment, Miriam does get used for the Sainsbury's run and the college run and the cinema run and all that sort of stuff, as well as the bigger things like the trip down to Bristol or the trip up to Edinburgh and all those things. We have been on a few long trips in the van. We made it up to a stay near Edinburgh, about 250 miles each way. We're staying in the south coast of Fife. In December 2021, we've been all the way to Northern Ireland, to the Northern Irish coast in summer of 2022. And we've done a few other trips, for example, to see friends and relatives down near Bristol.
So we get quite a lot of people that seem to claim that the range isn't enough or that they need more range. What's your perspective on that?
Well, Miriam's range is 100, maybe a bit more, but we don't want to risk more than that because I get real range anxiety when that last block of battery comes down. Realistically, we make stops at around sort of 80 or 90 miles most of the time on long distance drives. So a journey, for example, to Bristol, 220 miles, we're looking at 2 stops. So it's 2 motorway stops usually. But because of my wife's care needs, we stop for longer on the motorway than most families would anyway. It takes us longer to do the whole routine of getting out the van, getting to the loo, getting back out, getting coffee and all those things. It just takes us longer than most. So we stop for an hour anyway, and every time we stop at a services. So usually we've got charge with no problem in that amount of time. So yes, it takes longer than it used to in a car. We need to allow more time for that. Our next trip, for example, is going to be to our student age child's graduation next month in North Wales. It's about 150 miles each way, but we'll have a charge stop halfway along, and then we'll need to charge in North Wales before we can drive back again. So it'll take us about 4 hours, probably 150 miles, which is longer than we used to do, 150 miles to North Wales in a standard car. but we have allowed for that because it's a good compromise, we think, to allow the extra time, because the van doesn't go as fast as a standard car would. On a motorway, I drive at no more than about 55, usually about 53. And obviously then we have charge stops on the way as well.
Yeah, and I think it all comes back round again, like you say, it's a compromise and working out what works best for you and your family. And we find that it's always best as well to remember the thing that you mentioned before, is that the camper van has been a dream of your wife's
Absolutely.
for nearly her entire life, at least her entire driving life.
Yeah.
And although that may not be quite a figurative side to the scales from consideration, obviously to you and her, that's a big deal. And so I think one of the things that you mentioned there is that, yes, there's always going to be a bit of a compromise, but it's not to say that blanketly it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just that, as you said, for you've worked it out and it makes sense for you guys.
Well, absolutely. There's nothing like driving a classic camper. It's just so much fun. I just grin all the time. The family loves to drive.
Wave
as
at
well.
strangers.
Yeah, that camaraderie going down the road when you see another camper and you flash lights and you do the VW symbol and all that thing. It's fantastic. It's so much fun. And yes, there's some lack of creature comforts compared to a modern car. So the heating doesn't work too well, the ventilation doesn't work too well, the seats aren't as comfortable as a modern car, but no one's complained.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the van anyway.
Yeah.
And every time we pull up somewhere, someone comes up and says, "Oh, can I have a look? It's brilliant, gorgeous." And then I tell them it's an electric van, and they just don't believe me.
Yeah.
Very often.
So the final thing for you is to ask if there is somebody who's watching this video and they are considering either exploring electric camper vans, either through hiring one or potentially going for converting one for themselves, what would you say to that person?
Definitely go for it. Obviously, there's options to hire, so you can try one out and find out what it's like to live with a electric van for a few days. Obviously, Kit's team hire out vans. But there really isn't anything like driving a classic VW, and it fits in a car parking space. It's got huge load capacity, and no, it doesn't go very fast, but that's not the point. And of course, you're doing a tiny bit towards saving the planet by running the vehicle on electricity, which, as the UK electricity grid continues to decarbonise, you'll be using less and less carbon fuel to fuel your van as time permits. And depending on your provider, you could choose a 100% renewable electricity provider. So when you're at home, at least, you're 100% renewables going in the van. Some charge points say that they're 100% renewable as well, but not that many. So when you're using public charging, you're taking a chance as to what is fueling your van or your vehicle. But that's the same case for all EV customers. But obviously, in the news recently, that there's been news that the UK has not been meeting its green targets. This was breaking news yesterday, in fact. But some of the ways that the UK has been improving, even if it isn't meeting its targets, the UK grid is definitely decarbonising, continuously doing so. And EV sales are increasing, and the sales of EVs are driving improvements to the grid as well, so that charge points are being put in everywhere you look, and on an increasing rate. It's possible the charge points aren't keeping up with the EV sales, but charge points are being added everywhere all the time. Yeah,
and that'll plateau out, won't it? And like you say, it's all about, even though it feels like you're only making one very small decision for what you're going to do for your family, it's actually not just a part of that small decision of your day-to-day life, it's part of a much bigger puzzle to do with energy usage and transportation.
We as a family have tried to carry out a number of green initiatives that, in terms of recycling absolutely everything we can. We have solar panels on the roof and things like that, and we are generally energy efficient. There are some ways we can't be so very energy efficient in as much as, because my wife is home, our house is lit and heated all the time. where some people are out of their house during the day.
Yeah.
But we do try to reduce our carbon footprint and improve our environmental stance all the time.
Yeah.
And one way to do that, obviously, is to run an electric vehicle. I do still run a petrol-powered motorcycle right now, but I don't ride it very much. And I'm actually planning to get rid of it soon too.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. And we nearly got political there, but we didn't quite. That was very well dodged. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk through this with myself, and also to let some of our viewers see some of what the inner workings of an electric VW owner is all about. So thank you as well for watching. It's been great to catch up with old customers and hear the stories. If you're interested in exploring electric classic camper vans for yourself, then please get in touch with our team. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you can like and subscribe to be notified of new videos coming up. Or ideally, just head straight to our website, edubconversions.co.uk. There's tons of information there, and there's a little contact us button where you can drop us a message and we can start the conversation to explore what having an electric classic camper van might look like for you and your family. So thanks again to Zap, and thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.